Hey guys! So today I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up. I'm pretty pleased with the amount of books that I got through this month. I got through 4 books, 2 of which I read for Nonfiction November. I wasn't able to finish any of the other books for Nonfiction November on my TBR, but I did get through 2 that I want to talk about, and I also read 2 fiction books this month. So let's just get started with the first book. So the first book I actually read on Audible, and that was The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This was the final book in the Broken Earth series, and I have to say this was a really great conclusion to an awesome series. I really enjoyed it, though some of the stuff I wasn't familiar with because it had been a while since I read the last 2 books. So I plan on reading all 3 of them back to back so I can do like a full-on review of the entire series for you. So keep on the lookout for that. I should be doing that soon. I've already re-listened to the first book again, so I just need to finish the last 2 books in the series. But if you're looking for a new high fantasy book, I think this is a really great series to get into. I won't go into much detail about what the third one is, but if you haven't read the first one, it's called 5th Season, and it follows 3 females who all have this like sort of magical ability to control and manipulate Earth, but the people that have this ability are kind of looked down upon and are used as tools to manipulate the Earth because this Earth is very unstable and constantly changing, so the people with these powers are kind of trained and then used as like tools to manipulate their Earth and protect people. So it's a very interesting story. There's a lot to the plot that it's just hard to explain what the initial premise of the story is, but it's really great. And what I really enjoyed about this series in general was that it had a lot of great representation in it. There's a great cast of diverse characters, and the characters in general were just really great, and the story is just really fantastic. So I highly recommend this series, and keep on the lookout. I will be doing a full in-depth review on the entire series shortly. So the second book that I read, which I have a full review of, is My Dyslexia by Philip Schultz, and I will put the full review in the description and up above if you want to check it out. So essentially this book is a memoir of Philip Schultz, and he's discussing his dyslexia. He grew up without really realizing he had this learning disability, and then when his son was diagnosed with it, he realized he had the same condition as well, and he kind of reflects on his life and how dyslexia affected his journey to becoming a Pulitzer Prize winning poet, and it was just really spectacular. I think his writing, you can definitely tell that he's a poet. It's very lyrical and just flows very beautifully, and this book just really stuck with me. I am someone that does have dyslexia, and as someone who wants to be a writer, it was good to see someone else's journey and the kind of challenges that they face and being able to relate to those challenges. This was just a really great emotional book for me personally, just because I deal with the same issues that he has. But I think in general, this is also a really great book if you want to become a writer or if you're facing any other kind of learning disability. It's just such a human, there's just such a great connection in the issues and the challenges that he faced that I just find really great about this book. And it's really super short, so it's not very hard to get through. And the next book is the book that kind of slowed my month of reading down. I typically only read 1 book at a time, and this book just took me forever to get through. I actually started this book in October, and that is The Beast of Extraordinary Circumstance by Ruth Emmy Lang. And I actually received this as an advance copy on NetGalley, but then I saw that it was on Book of the Month, so I figured why not just get a physical copy of it as well. This essentially just follows a boy called Waylon Gray, and he was orphaned as a young child and then grew up with a pack of wolves, and then it just kind of follows his story dealing with all those issues. There's a lot of like magical realism. The interesting part about this book is that there's only 1 chapter, which is at the very end of the book, that is from his perspective. The other chapters all follow characters that he encounters, and then there are a few characters that we follow throughout the entire series, but most of them are characters that we follow for one section. And that's something about the book that I think really slowed down my reading, is the way this book is structured. It kind of goes into about 5 or 6 parts. So it starts off with him as an adult, a much older man, talking to a young boy about his experiences and his adventures growing up. And then we see each of those parts in the book. So each of those parts, we follow 2 characters that are kind of interacting with Waylon and dealing with their own situations. And while I found those parts to be really strong because you get to see these characters in a unique and interesting way and see how this main character, Waylon, kind of affects the decisions that they make and the choices and the situations that they encounter. But it's hard to really get into those characters because you're only with them for about, I would say, maybe 100 to 50 pages. So it feels like every time you start a new part, you're starting a new book because you're following a new set of characters, and you kind of have to navigate getting introduced to them and also figuring out what their story is, what their connection to Waylon Gray is. And I think that just slowed my reading of this a little bit, but I did quite enjoy this book. I think the whimsy of it is really interesting. It's supposed to be based on the premise based on fantasy and fairy tales. I didn't find any fairy tale connections outright. I mean, I'm not that familiar with fairy tales, so I might have just missed them. But it does have this very magical realism aspect to it. This boy, the Waylon Gray, he has this ability to control weather and plants, but these capabilities are never really truly explained, but they affect a lot of what goes on in the story in an interesting and intriguing way. And through the vein of the story is a really adorable love story. And I think if that had been throughout the story, we kind of get it in the beginning and then more towards the end. I think if that had been carried out throughout the story, it would have made it really much more interesting, because I found that the connection between him and one of the characters that is actually laced throughout each part, it was the most strongest part about this book. So I just think this book, while it took me a long time to get through, I did enjoy it, and I think it's worth checking out if you really like magical realism, and if you're looking for something more on the adult side. This is definitely a very character-driven story, but the plot isn't disinteresting in any way. It's very cool, and I like the magical aspects that kind of move the plot along. There were a few issues that I had about the story and why she kind of decided to build up this premise. Like, one of my issues was we do have this main character that was raised by wolves, but we never really get to see what that's like, I guess. All of that part is kind of like cut out and breaked out between the parts. So I kind of wish we would have gotten to see more what his life with the wolves was. Again, this is more about the interactions and the relationships with the people that he has in his life and the people that he encounters. So I get that the part about him living with wolves isn't really what the story is about. Overall, I think it's definitely worth checking out, and I really enjoyed it. I think her writing is really beautiful, so I will definitely be checking out anything else that she writes. And the final book that I read in November, this was also one of the books that I wanted to get to in Nonfiction November. This is Ernest Hemingway's On Writing. When I purchased this book, I thought it was going to be a lot like Stephen King's On Writing book. When I ended up reading it, it's kind of like just a collection of quotes from his books, from letters and other correspondence he's had with other people, and just kind of compiled, and then they're divided up in categories based on writing. Like, there's a category about characters, there's a category about the writing routine and about dealing with other writers and dealing with what to take out of writing, and so that sort of thing. This book isn't really something you do have to read like chronologically or in the order that it's laid out in this book. It's very much fractured. They're just quotes about picked from all of his, because it's not something he actually wrote. This is like a compilation of everything that he's ever talked about writing. So it's a good book to kind of dip in and out of. I ended up reading it in about 2 days, so I didn't really dip in and out of it, but I think this would be a good book to do that. As you can see, I've tabbed it up quite a bit, so there are a lot of quotes that really stuck with me, and I think this is a good inspiration, but it doesn't really have like those concrete tips that you would probably be looking for on an on-writing book. This is really just like inspirational quotes. I think it's a really good book if you're in a writer's gap and you kind of just want something about writing to read, and it's just fun. It's really short, and I like to learn more about Ernest Hemingway. I think he's a really interesting writer, and I'm more interested in his personal life rather than his writing, honestly. But it was a really cool book to read. Those are the 4 books that I got through in November. While I didn't read a ton of the stuff that was on my nonfiction TBR, I did end up reading 2 nonfiction books, which I'm pretty happy about. And I also got through 2 fiction books, both of which I really enjoyed. So let me know what you guys got through in the month of November. Did you have a great reading month like me? And if you've read any of these books and want to discuss them further, please put comments down below and we can start a discussion. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye!